On February 16, 2017, an Ohio church volunteer placed a call to 911. He told the operator that a 75-year-old woman he had been caring for over a decade was not acting herself and seemingly refused to get out of a specific chair at her home. However, police were not prepared for the horrific scene that awaited them when they arrived at Barbara Foster's home in Springfield Township. Barbara, who at that point weighed 550 pounds, was found literally molded to her chair as her skin had begun attaching itself to the fabric. It seemed that she had been trapped in the chair for at least a year, and as emergency personnel removed her from the house, Barbara's bones started breaking because they were extremely frail. From the sight and smell of the house, it was clear that Barbara Foster was a hoarder, with the smell becoming so strong that it reached the sidewalk before Barbara was rescued. Barbara's left leg was amputated soon after she arrived at the hospital, but unfortunately after a month-long stay in the hospital, the former teacher and animal lover died in March 2017. In October 2007, Brian and Susan Trost bought their dream home in Weldon Spring, Missouri. To their honor and dismay, the couple soon began seeing brown recluse spiders everywhere in their home. Once when Susan was taking a shower, one of the spiders fell from the ceiling and almost landed on her. She dodged it just in time and washed it down the shower drain. The Trosts filed a claim with their insurance company and lodged a claim against the home's previous owner. This was after they had tried to deal with the problem by employing exterminators to spray behind the drywall and put down pesticide in the attic. These measures did not help at all, and by 2012 the house was literally oozing spiders. The population of spiders were estimated to be around 5,000. The Trosts were forced to move and their home went into foreclosure. In 2014, the house had been vacant for 2 years, but only of people. The brown recluse spiders continue to overrun the property. In 1980, Pedro Alonso Gomez was arrested for trying to lure a 12-year-old girl away while she was browsing through a market in Ecuador. This incident took place mere days after a massive grave of 53 young girls was uncovered in the area. After being taken into custody, Lopez confessed to the murders of 300 girls. His MO was to pose as a salesman who had become lost and needed assistance to get back to his office. He would then lure young girls away from their distracted families and proceed to rape and murder them. He told police he committed the murders to ensure the girls could go to heaven. Shockingly, this monster received a mere 16-year prison sentence and was released in 1994 after serving only 14 years. An hour after being released, Lopez was arrested again for illegal immigration and deported back to Colombia. Here he was convicted of murder he committed 20 years prior. However, he was declared insane and spent some of his time in a mental asylum before being released in 1998. In 2020, no one knows Lopez's whereabouts. He could be continuing his murderous streak unabated anywhere in the world. Rumors that he had died in a vigilante-style killing have yet to be confirmed. In 1955, 26-year-old Zara Atalib went into labor and suffered for 48 hours before being rushed to a local hospital in Morocco. Upon her arrival, Zara witnessed another woman dying in excruciating pain. While giving birth, and this frightened her so much that she fled back home. When, after a while, her labor pains ceased, Zara carried on with her life. She never gave birth and never suffered a miscarriage. She adopted 3 children and eventually became a grandmother. 46 years after her terrifying experience at the hospital, Zara felt intense pain once more. The doctors took an ultrasound scan of her belly and found a mass. An MRI scan revealed the mass to be her unborn baby. It was discovered that Zara's pregnancy had been ectopic, with the fetus growing from the fallopian tube and into her stomach. Because the baby was never born, it basically calcified inside Zara's body and was removed during a 4-hour procedure. Zara became known as a woman who gave birth to a stone baby when she was over 70 years old. In 2013, a grisly new discovery was made as part of ongoing research into the Jamestown colony. While recent excavations have led to the discovery of animal carcasses consumed during the harsh winter of 1609, newly discovered bones told a terrifying tale of human dismemberment and cannibalization. The bones belonged to a 14-year-old English girl. The bones revealed that the girl had been struck by an object to the head at least 4 times, which led to her skull being split in 2. She also had a penetrating wound to her left temple, which is believed to have been made by a knife for the purpose of removing her brain and the flesh from her face for consumption. While experts agree that the young girl was dismembered to be eaten, it remains to be discovered whether multiple people cut her into pieces or whether one person was responsible for this despicable act. There are a multitude of conspiracy theories and dark rumors that swirl around Disney Enterprises. These include hidden details of evil in Disney movies, including that Frozen is simply a distraction from Walt Disney's frozen head. You know, the head that is currently stored underneath the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland. When people Google Frozen or Disney Frozen, it now displays results about the movie and not the host of conspiracies about Walt's wishes to be cryogenically frozen after his death. Sometimes, though, real twisted events make these theories seem just the tiniest bit more plausible. For instance, in 2010, 2 Disneyland Paris employees killed themselves. One of the employees was a restaurant manager at Disneyland and had a wife and 4 children. After the 37-year-old committed suicide, a note was found scratched on a wall in his house. "I don't want to work for Mickey anymore." The other employee had thrown himself in front of a train a month earlier. The suicides have been attributed to a less than ideal working environment under new management, which has been making employees miserable. In 2015, a family from Schuylkill County wanted to add some insulation behind the walls of a room in their Auburn house. They were not prepared for what they found behind the layers of drywall: several dead animal carcasses wrapped in newspapers, dating back to the 30s and 40s. Kaja Brutsius confirmed that they had made 1 or 2 more animal discoveries since 2012, but nothing at the scale of the new discovery, and that the home inspection before they moved in didn't reveal any of the horror behind the walls. Removing the carcasses, half-used spices, and other items from behind the walls have depleted the family's savings as the insurance didn't cover any of it. The family, looking for answers, sent some of the artifacts and animal remains to an expert in Kutztown, who told them that the items were placed inside the walls as part of a Dutch magic ritual to heal diseases. The family have since started a GoFundMe account to raise money to tear out more walls to ensure there aren't any more animal remains tucked away. In March of 2014, Katrina McGaw signed a lease on a North County ranch house. Her landlady was Sandra Travis. A few months after moving in, Katrina was watching a documentary on serial killers with a friend when they both suddenly sat up straight and looked at each other in alarm. The house being featured in various crime scene photos on the TV screen was the very one they were sitting in. The house Katrina was living in previously belonged to serial killer Maury Travis, son of her landlady Sandra Travis. Maury had built several torture chambers in the basement of the house and kept corpses there. Katrina immediately went to Sandra and demanded she be let out of the lease. Sandra was unwilling to release Katrina from the lease until the St. Louis Housing Authority intervened. Only then did she agree to rescind the contract. Maury Travis killed himself before he could be charged with the murders of 17 women. Thank you guys for watching to the end. If you would like one of your true scary experiences and stories featured on an upcoming video, be sure to email my email in the description box below. Till we meet again, stay safe, stay scared. One of the spookiest urban legends out there is the babysitter and the man upstairs. The scenario is quite frightening. A young girl is babysitting one night when she starts getting threatening phone calls from an anonymous figure. When she notifies the police, they inform her that the threatening calls are coming from inside the house. Even though the above situation is fictional, as there are many cases of teenager babysitters being stalked and murdered in movies, urban legends often do have some basis in fact. Babysitting can sometimes be a frightening experience in which it's easy to feel vulnerable, especially since plenty of real-life cases involving babysitters have ended in terrifying things happening. Number 10. The murder of Janet Christman. Many people believe that the urban legend, The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs, was inspired by a real-life murder case from Columbia, Missouri in the 1950s. On the evening of March 18th, 12-year-old Janet Christman was babysitting a 3-year-old boy named Gregory Romack. At 10:35 p.m., a police officer received a disturbing phone call from a hysterical female caller. He could hear the woman screaming and yelling the words, "Come quick," before the call was abruptly cut off. Unfortunately, during this time period, the police did not have the proper resources to do an immediate trace. 3 hours later, Greg Romack's parents returned home. The boy was sleeping in his bed, but Janet Christman's body was on the living room floor. Janet had been hit in the head with a blunt object and raped before she was strangled to death with an ironing cord. Even though the front window of the Romack home had been broken with a garden hose, nothing else in the house appeared to be disturbed. Since both doors were unlocked, police theorized that Janet willingly opened the door for her killer, who shattered the window to make her murder look like a break-in. The prime suspect in the crime was Robert Mueller, a friend of the Romacks who had reportedly made inappropriate lewd comments toward Janet in the past. Police believe Janet's head was punctured with a mechanical pencil, an item Mueller often carried. Mueller was questioned by the police, but since they detained him under questionable circumstances, a grand jury ultimately decided not. Mueller subsequently moved to California, and the murder of Janet Christman was never solved. Number 9. The disappearance of Lori Jean Lloyd. On the evening of February 11, 1976, a 14-year-old Lori Jean Lloyd was scheduled to spend the night babysitting at a residence in Kettering, Ohio, and was accompanied by one of her friends. At approximately midnight, Lori's mother went to the residence and saw that both Lori's friend and the child they were babysitting had fallen asleep, but Lori was not there. When Lori's friend woke up, she claimed that Lori had stepped out to walk to a nearby 7-Eleven, but she apparently never returned. No one from the 7-Eleven remembered seeing Lori that night, and she could not be found anywhere. According to another one of her friends, Lori had planned on meeting an unidentified boy that same night, and the couple were thinking of running away to California together. This story has never been verified, but it seemed unlikely that Lori ran away voluntarily since she left all of her personal possessions behind. The case took a bizarre turn in 1980 when Lori's family watched a produced documentary about drugs and thought they saw a girl resembling her in the background of a scene. Even though it is a standard practice for documentaries to get their subjects to sign release forms, the production company could not find paperwork for Lori or any other young woman who might have appeared in that particular scene. After nearly 40 years, Lori Jean Lloyd remains a missing person. The murder of Jaden Lesky. In 1997, Australia experienced one of its most sensational and bizarre missing persons cases ever. On the evening of June 14th, Linda Lesky was invited to a party and entrusted her boyfriend Greg Demashowitz to babysit her 14-month-old Jaden. At 2:30 a.m., Greg left his home in Newborough to pick up Linda from a pub, but Jaden was not in the vehicle. Greg told Linda that Jaden was in the hospital following a minor incident, but since she was intoxicated, Greg convinced her it would not be a good idea to visit her son until the morning. However, when the couple returned home, they were surprised to discover that the windows had been smashed and a pig's head was now on the front lawn. When Linda woke up in the morning, Greg made a shocking confession. He had lied about taking Jaden to the hospital and actually left the child alone when he went to pick her up. Jaden was now missing, and Greg believed that the same people who had vandalized his home had abducted him. Tissues containing Jaden's blood were later found in an outside trash can. In January of 1998, Jaden's body was discovered inside a sleeping bag in a Blue Rock Dam. The child was believed to have died from head injuries, and his body was weighed down with a crowbar. Naturally, many people were suspicious of Greg's story. It turned out that the relatives of Greg's ex-girlfriend had smashed his windows and left the pig's head on his lawn as a prank, but they denied any involvement in Jaden's death. Greg Demashowitz was eventually charged with Jaden's murder, but was acquitted at trial due to lack of evidence. Officially, the murder of Jaden Lesky remains unsolved. Number 7. The suspicious babysitting activities of Suzanne Baker. In November of 2009, a bizarre babysitting story unfolded in Chipley, Florida, when 7-month-old Shannon Diedrich disappeared from her home. At the time, Shannon's babysitter was Susan Baker, the half-sister of Shannon's father. 5 days later, Shannon was found alive inside a wooden box inside Suzanne's home. Susan claimed that she'd kidnapped the child to protect her from drug user parents. Nevertheless, Susan was convicted on numerous felony charges and sentenced to 25 years in prison. This would not be the only suspicious disappearance to occur while Susan Baker was looking after a child. Over 20 years later, Susan was employed as a babysitter by James and Linda Baker, but the couple's marriage dissolved when James was discovered to be having an affair with Susan. James was subsequently awarded custody of his children, 6-year-old Nina and their 3-year-old Paul. By 1987, James was married to Susan, and they lived with the 2 children in Beaufort, South Carolina. On March 5th, Susan was babysitting Paul and claimed to have fallen asleep after putting Paul down for a nap. When she woke up, Paul was gone from the house. Around the same time, a family services office received a phone call from an unidentified woman who claimed to have taken Paul. However, suspicion turned towards Susan once it was discovered that both Baker children suffered constant abuse at her hands. Though there was never enough evidence to indict Susan for Paul's disappearance, she was sentenced to 10 years in prison for abusing Nina, but her sentence was suspended after only serving 80 days. Even though Susan Baker is now back in prison for another crime, she continues to remain silent about what happened to her former stepson. The murder of Pamela Mason. In 1964, 14-year-old Pamela Mason posted a flyer at a laundromat in Manchester, New Hampshire, advertising her services. It wasn't long until an unidentified man answered Pamela's ad and phoned her to say he needed a babysitter. On January 13th, Pamela left her home to go meet this man. 8 days later, she was found dead in a snowbank. She had been sexually assaulted, stabbed, and shot to death. Authorities noticed similarities between Pamela's death and the murder of an 18-year-old Manchester woman named Sandra Valade, which had occurred 4 years earlier. Weeks after Pamela's murder, a laundromat employee named Rena Paquette told authorities she had seen a man named Edward Coolidge taking an interest in Pamela's babysitting flyer and believed him to be their killer. The following morning, Paquette was found burned to death inside a barn on her property. After incriminating evidence was discovered in Coolidge's vehicle and his home, he was arrested and charged with Pamela Mason's murder. He was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, the conviction became the subject of controversy, as the searches to obtain evidence against Coolidge were believed to be unconstitutional. The case made it all the way to the United States Supreme Court in 1971. Since the Attorney General of New Hampshire had personally signed the warrants to search Coolidge's vehicle and property, the Supreme Court ruled that the warrants were invalid since they were not issued by a neutral and detached magistrate. As a result, Coolidge's first-degree murder conviction was overturned. He agreed to plead to the lesser charge of second-degree murder and was released from prison in 1991. While most people are convinced that Coolidge was Pamela Mason's killer, the deaths of Sandra Valade and Rena Paquette were never solved. Number 5. The disappearance of Heather Killorn. On the evening of July 14, 1999, 12-year-old Heather Killorn went to an apartment in Richmond Heights, Missouri to babysit the 2-month-old daughter of some family friends, Dana Madden and Christopher Herbert. At 4 a.m. the following morning, Herbert claimed he returned home to discover that Heather was gone and that his infant daughter was left unattended. 2 hours earlier, a neighbor had seen an unidentified man exit the apartment. This man was carrying what appeared to be a child wrapped in a blanket. A comforter blanket just happened to be missing from the apartment, and small traces of blood were found on the couch. DNA testing confirmed that the blood belonged to Heather. The case took a further disturbing turn once investigators found drug paraphernalia in the apartment and began to suspect that Dana Madden and Christopher Herbert had ties to a methamphetamine ring. Herbert allegedly stole some drug manufacturing equipment from a couple the day before Heather went missing, and it's been theorized that her disappearance is somehow connected to drug activity. 9 months later, Heather's mother showed up at the convenience store where Dana Madden worked and got into a violent altercation with her, accusing the couple of withholding information about what happened to her daughter. Even though Madden was at work and had an alibi on the night Heather disappeared, Herbert was frequently changed his story about his whereabouts. While authorities do have a person of interest, they lack the evidence to make an official arrest, so Heather Killorn remains a missing person to this day. Number 4. The murder of Kellyanne Tynes. On March 3, 1989, a 13-year-old Kellyanne Tynes was put in charge of babysitting her 8-year-old brother, Richie, at their home in Valley Steam, New York. When the phone rang that afternoon, Richie picked it up, and a man calling himself John asked to speak with his sister. After Kelly took the call, she told Richie that she needed to step out to go see someone. She did not return, so Richie went searching through the neighborhood for her and learned that Kelly was seen entering the home of a family named the Golubs. When Richie tried knocking on the Golubs' door, no one answered. The next day, police conducted a search of the Golub residence. They found Kelly's body wrapped in a sleeping bag inside of a closet. She had been raped and strangled to death before her body was mutilated. At the time Kelly was seen entering the Golub residence, there were 4 people in the house: 14-year-old John Golub Jr., 2 of John's friends, and John's 21-year-old bodybuilder brother, Robert. Even though Kelly received a call from someone named John, all the physical evidence at the murder scene pointed to Robert. While there was no suspicion that John Golub Jr. might have been involved in the crime, Robert was the only one officially charged. He was convicted of second-degree murder and received a sentence of 25 years to life in prison. Robert spent the next 2 decades maintaining that he was framed, but finally came clean during a parole hearing in 2013. He claimed that he accidentally knocked Kelly down some stairs before attacking her in a fit of rage brought on by anabolic steroids. In spite of this confession, Robert Golub's attempt at parole was rejected. One of the world's youngest known serial killers was Christine Falling, who earned the nickname the Babysitter Killer. Born in Perry, Florida, Falling experiencing a very abusive childhood. Her mental instability was apparent from an early age, when she started strangling cats and dropping them from high places to see if they actually had 9 lives. On February 25, 1980, 16-year-old Falling was babysitting a 2-year-old girl named Cassidy Johnson when the child was suddenly taken to the doctor's office with brain inflammation. 3 days later, Cassidy was dead. An autopsy determined that the child had suffered blunt trauma to the skull, and Falling claimed that she accidentally fell out of her crib while sleeping. There were suspicions about Falling's story, but unfortunately they were not properly investigated. Months later, 4-year-old Jeffrey Davis died while Falling was babysitting him, and the cause of death was believed to be heart inflammation. While Jeffrey's family attended his funeral, Falling babysat his 2-year-old cousin, Joseph Spring. Joseph wound up dying in his crib that day of an apparent viral infection. Falling soon got a job as a housekeeper for 77-year-old William Schindel. Incredibly, Schindel suffered a fatal heart attack during Falling's first day on the job. Shortly thereafter, Falling was watching over her 18-month-old niece, Jennifer Daniels, inside a car while her mother was shopping. The child suddenly stopped breathing and died. Falling's final victim was 10-week-old Travis Coleman, who also stopped breathing while she was babysitting him in July 1982. This time, an autopsy determined that Travis had died of suffocation. Falling was questioned and subsequently confessed to smothering Travis and all the other children who died in her care. She received a life sentence for the murders. I want you guys to let me know what you think of all of these heinous and unbelievable stories, crimes against children. If you want your true scary story featured on an upcoming video, email my email in the description box below to have your story featured. I need new stories, guys, because this channel is literally dying. I need a resurgence of support, new subscribers, new shares. Let's do this together. I want to do this differently because what I've been doing for the last 8 years clearly isn't working. So any ideas that you guys want to throw my way in the comment section or anywhere on my Instagram, wherever, I would love it greatly from me to you. Thank you. We just got back from a nice week at an Airbnb. We're the type of guests who abide by the host's rules, treat the property like it's our own. That's the legacy I want to leave with those hosts. I've read so many horror stories in this group about renters, and I'm appalled. We had something quite strange happen while we were at a house this past week. A snoopy neighbor. We could sit out at night and drink wine and watch the stars. We rented in a quiet neighborhood and got to know the neighbors' schedules. Whenever either of the neighbors on either side were outside, they would have their lights on. However, one night, we were doing the usual stargazing, and I looked over to one neighbor. He was pressed up against the fence recording us. All you could see through the broken fence was his illuminated cell phone. We didn't even need to use our binoculars to see that they continued to watch us even after we caught them. It scared me and I felt threatened by this man's behavior. We ducked behind the outdoor sofa and continued the night, which we wound up cutting short. This changed how we enjoyed our outdoor time the next few nights. The house was perfect for us and we had a good time. The grass hasn't been cut actually, so it was getting long, but whatever. I don't know if I can give the owner a great review because of his creepy neighbor. I don't know what his motives were, or why he was recording us on his phone, but I feel like this is something I should either mention to the owner or withhold a good review altogether. We rented a house near the beach, so it wasn't cheap. I wouldn't want other women going there to find that same behavior. Thoughts? We arrived and entered the house by way of the code provided for the electronic door lock. We had stopped to pick up groceries and some needed refrigeration, so we carried those in first, which is when I discovered the fridge filled with food. I looked around and saw more food and personal items in the kitchen. I called out to no answer, so we walked around a bit. Imagine if you left your home for the day for work and a stranger walked in. This is exactly how it all appeared. We hurried back to the car, afraid that we were going to have the police called on us. We called the company, who reassured us and told us the house owner had said he was going to get things cleared up, which apparently hadn't happened. This seemed like something the company should have checked, but they assured us it was fine to just push things aside. In the process of clearing things away into a large closet, we found half-used bottles of cancer medications and some paperwork which indicated the owner had been treated for stage 4 cancer. Between these and other paperwork found in the house, we are fairly certain the owner died there, and his children had the body transported back to where his wife was buried in a northern state. We guess they arranged to rent the place out without ever coming to clear out their dead father's belongings. It's a little eerie for me. We were staying in an Airbnb. My parents were out for the evening. My parents were gone for a while, and I was just staying up really late, past midnight, on my desktop computer waiting for them to return. Like most people, I had been told a million times not to talk to strangers on the internet, but about half of my friends list on MSN were people I had never met before, so I was just chatting with a bunch of them. One of my new online friends had told me exactly what I had been doing the past hour or two, ergo, what I was eating, drinking, playing with when I had gotten up last, things I hadn't mentioned in chat. I instantly got a horrible pit in my stomach. My desktop was set up in front of a big window, so as far as I knew, this person had been talking to, that was supposed to live in a different country than me, had found my address and been watching me through the window. It turns out he had hacked into my webcam. I always left it plugged in, even though I had been warned not to when I wasn't using it, and he had been frequently watching me through it whenever he wanted. It's been 10 years and I still have all the cameras on my devices covered in thick duct tape. I was about 8 and I was taking the trash outside after the sun went down, when a hand reached from side of our back deck and grabbed my leg, trying to yank me. I screamed very loud. They let go and I ran inside. When I was a kid around 10 years old, I was babysitting my 7-year-old sister. We grew up near an insane asylum, and every now and then we'd get an escapee in our yard. They would walk off the grounds and head through the woods towards the nearest town. They'd get about a mile to our place and realize walking 40 miles to that town was probably not happening. So then they would ask to use the phone to call and get picked up by the hospital. This happened every now and then, but this was the first time it happened when I was home without my parents. The woman who arrived in our driveway wanted me to call the hospital to pick her up, but she also asked me if I had some matches, presumably to light a cigarette. I ushered my sister into the house and locked the door as I called. The woman was kind of half screaming, half moaning. "Matches! I need matches!" Until they came and picked her up. I'm sure it was just for a cigarette, but it also could have been to burn us alive, so I didn't give her any. I was staying at an Airbnb in Nebraska. I was surrounded by woods and corn and wheat fields all around. While inside watching TV one night, I decided to step out on the porch and light a cigarette. I'm about halfway done when I take another drag, and when I blow out the smoke, it rolls around a face about a foot away from me. Needless to say, I tossed a cigarette and noped back inside and locked the doors. I was house sitting and babysitting for a new neighbor. She was a single mom from the East Coast, moved to Minneapolis. I was a 6th grade teacher. All I had to do was sit in the house and do my math homework while she was on a date. Her 2-year-old baby was sleeping in his crib and his room. Around 9 p.m. I get a call and answer. It's some man who only asks, "Who are you?" I say I'm the babysitter. Then he starts asking all these questions about where the mom is and who I am personally. I get scared and hang up and call the mom and let her know. The guy calls back and then just starts saying the address I'm at. Then asks if the baby's okay. When I say yes, he is, he says, "How can you be so sure when he is that close to a window?" To which I just go, "I'm just the babysitter, and I'm trying really hard on my math homework, and now I'm scared and I'm also failing math." Basically, a mental breakdown happened. 5 minutes later, the mom shows up and explains it's her ex-husband who just found her. She hands me a wad of cash and excuses me. I don't know if the guy was in the bushes or calling from Massachusetts or what. It was scary. My sister had gotten home from high school and was all alone. Some guys came and tapped at the gate. Where I live, you do occasionally get people knocking, and it will either be Jehovah's Witnesses or people saying they're raising funds for a recovery program they're in, or lying about being in, or people selling something, that sort of stuff. She couldn't be bothered, so she just ignored them as she sat in the living room. After a moment of silence, she hears a bang and the garage door rolling up. She runs to the garage and screams as she sees 2 men inside. They had been scoping out homes looking for empty ones to rob. The guys likely just grabbed the 2 bikes in the garage and booked it. My mom mostly complained about the stolen bikes when she got home. But hey, way better that they took those old rusty things than ransack the whole house or do something to my sister. To this day, that's why I go to the door when people tap at the gate. I rather tell them, "No thank you," or "not right now," and have them know the house isn't empty, just in case it's someone scoping out houses. A couple years ago, I was home alone. My husband was traveling out of state. I put on the news on the Samsung TV in the living room, set the remote on the coffee table, and went into the kitchen next room over to make dinner. After a few minutes, I noticed I don't hear the sound of news anymore, and I thought maybe the signal went out or the TV timed out and shut itself off. I come back into the living room, and the TV screen is showing a picture of a couch in a living room. My living room. It takes me a minute to realize the camera in my TV has been activated and is showing a live video of the room. The remotes were still on the table, so no chance the dog accidentally stepped on them and pressed buttons or anything like that. A few days later, news broke that Samsung smart TVs had a hacking issue. I guess the real mystery is how often I was spied on before I put tape over that camera. I was watching a horror movie. I can't remember what one, but in it was a scene with lots of crows dying around a farmhouse, flying at the windows, smacking into them. And guess what the hell happened? A damn bird smacked into the window during that movie scene. I almost shit my pants and was covered in goosebumps. It was January in Minnesota. There was about a foot of snow on the ground and my parents were out at a bar. My brother was at a friend's house, but would come back later in the evening. I was in my living room watching TV and heard a small knocking coming from the basement. So I walked down to investigate all over the basement to find nothing. Not thinking much of it, I walked back upstairs to the living room to continue watching. About 5 minutes later, I hear a loud crash from the basement and what sounded like a door opening. At this point, I was pretty worried. I started to make my way down the stairs, terrified, and as I went down, I thought maybe my brother was home without me knowing. so I called his name. Nothing. I called again, and nothing, so I kept slowly moving down the stairs, only to find that there were drawers open and desks, boxes open, and a few plastic bins and containers all knocked down and tipped over, but worst of all, my back glass door wide open with footprints leading out the door. I shut it, called my parents, and when they came, my mom called the police while my dad followed them. According to him, they went over my fence and to the road behind my house where they stopped. My guess is he was picked up, but we and the police never found out if it was planned or just a random house they picked to rob. Absolutely terrifying. My husband and I stayed in an Airbnb in 2019 during the fall season. It was raining heavily outside. I was sitting on the chairs looking out the window, and then suddenly I heard something walking on the floor above me. I thought it was just a sound my mind was creating, because I was already scared, so I ignored. About 5 minutes later, I hear someone knock on the window. I thought maybe it was a bird who hit the window or something, but then, suddenly this huge floor lamp fell right on me. And I sat there for a solid 10 minutes trying to understand what happened. The lamp was perfectly fine. I still don't know or understand how it fell. Definitely the creepiest moment of my life. Thank you guys for watching and listening to the very end of this video. If you want your true scary story featured on an upcoming video, email your true scary story to my email in the description box below. I hope everyone's having a great early summer start off. Stay safe, stay scared. As a North Salem high school went into lockdown on a Friday afternoon in the middle of winter, 14-year-old Kylie Jackson and her classmates barricaded the door to their classroom and armed themselves with scissors. She and her classmates threw a bunch of desks and chairs in front of the door and went in a corner, she said after emerging from the school, where she said she was still a bit shaky. Parish Middle School and North Salem High School were locked down for about an hour, following a report at 1:30 p.m. of a man wearing a sports-type mask walking near the campus of the high school while brandishing a gun, according to local authorities. The Salem Police Department said in a statement late Friday that officers searched for but could not find an individual matching that description. Police said they did a thorough search inside the high school, including campus buildings, and that the department was investigating to determine the facts surrounding the initial report of the suspicious individual. Days after a gunman killed 21 people, including 19 children in Texas, people are still apprehensive when it comes to any incident inside of a school. Salem Kaiser Public Schools said on social media that relatives shouldn't come to the schools during the lockdowns, but many did, trying to retrieve their students, anxiously waiting outside both schools. Kylie was in her social studies class taking notes about Japan when the lockdown began. Students were initially told the lockdown was at the lowest level, then it escalated. "We thought somebody was in the building because that's what a level 3 lockdown means," Kylie said. She thought about what happened in Texas earlier this week. "It happened so recently that you've got to think, this happens all the time," Kylie said. It was her first extensive lockdown. "We grabbed scissors out of our teacher's drawers and were holding scissors just in case someone came in. I was shaking the whole time. Our teacher was like, try to think of something you can throw in case somebody comes inside." Her mom, Tina, was waiting outside for her. "She started texting me at home right away, telling me they were on lockdown," Jackson said. "So it's so scary." Mercedes Galagos stood outside of Parish Middle School waiting for her 14-year-old brother. Usually he rides a bus home, but Galagos came to the school because she was really worried something bad was going to happen. Galagos' brother has a cell phone, and he messaged her that everything was okay. "It made my stomach turn upside down, just watching all these parents worry," Gallegos said. It just made me worry because anything can happen at this time. Anything. Outside of Parish, several dozen parents and caregivers waited in a line and in clusters outside while school staff collected names and identifications. People were talking to each other and on cell phones, or waiting while holding the leash of their dog or the hand of a smaller child. One woman carried an infant in a car seat. Outside of North Salem High School, family members waited on the lawn and embraced children. Some students stood talking on the lawn. A teacher walked around the grounds with a dog on a leash and a pot filled with tiny yellow flowers. All students and staff were reported safe, according to the district. So this happened 2 years ago. It was an ordinary day. I went to school, people were talking, laughing, and bullies were being bullies. When class started, I sat in my chair as our teacher told us to take out our notebooks for our science project. We did planets, so I chose Mars. We worked for a while when the lockdown alarm went off. The principal told us to remain calm in our class and lock the doors, as this was not a drill. So I sat there very calm, while all the girls screamed and cried. Someone knocked on the door. As we did not answer, the person bashed at the door. It was then long enough when he walked away. The intercom came on again with someone's voice. He said, "Hello, you're all gonna die." I froze in my spot as the girls cried. It was moments after when he came back to our door. The glass smashed and we saw a hand reach through the door screaming, "I'll kill you all." All it was seconds after he managed to open the door. My teacher ran at him and tried to tackle him. My teacher's head literally exploded and everyone whined. He came over and shot 2 of the class bullies. Then SWAT stormed the door, telling him to drop the weapon. Then he tried to shoot them. They shot him in the head. On October 2nd, 2006, milk tank driver Charles Carl Roberts opened fire on a small Amish schoolhouse in Bart Township. Prior to going to school, Roberts left a suicide note at home for his wife and children. Roberts entered the one-room schoolhouse and ordered all the boys to leave, as well as 1 pregnant woman and 3 parents with infants. He ordered the remaining 10 girls against the wall and held them hostage. Sisters Mariah and Barbara Fisher, aged 13 and 11, courageously asked to be shot first in exchange for the lives of the other young girls. Some were as young as 6 years old. Roberts killed Mariah and wounded Barbara. In addition, he shot 8 of the 10 girls, killing 5 of them. Custodian Edward Charles Alway was reported as going postal on July 12, 1976 at California State University in Fullerton, California. The 37-year-old employee of the institute had a history of violence and mental illness and was later diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. He was found insane by the judge at his trial for the murders. He called the police after killing 7 people and wounding 2 others, turned himself in. His motives behind the mass murder included him believing the university library was screening pornographic movies his wife was forced to appear in. He is currently receiving medical treatment for his condition at the Patton State Hospital. High school seniors Eric Harris, 18, and Dylan Claybold, 17, may have not committed the deadliest school shooting in the U.S., but their killing spree at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado, is considered one of the most infamous attacks in history. It sparked numerous debates, including gun control, antidepressant drugs, and the influence of social cliques, violent video games, and bullying have on the mental health of high school students. Harris and Claybold spent countless hours preparing for the events on April 20th, 1999, which were documented in their basement tapes. The tapes contain footage of the 2 boys having target practice with illegally obtained firearms, as well as a suicide message and apology to their parents. Their ultimate goal was to be responsible for more victims than the Oklahoma City bombing, an event the boys idolized. The morning of the shootings, Harris and Claybold encountered one of their few friends, Brooks Brown, in the school parking lot. Brown was one of the few students the shooters considered a friend. They told him to leave campus immediately because something bad was about to happen. Reports claim the boys targeted jocks, taunted people for their belief in Christianity, and made jokes with each other while they killed their peers. Harris and Claybold took the lives of 13 people and injured 24. They both committed suicide like two cowards in the library together. Virginia Polytech Institute and State University in Blacksburg, Virginia, came under attack on April 16, 2007. Senior student Seung-Hoo Choi killed 32 people and injured 17 more in 2 attacks, one in a co-ed dormitory, the other in the Engineering, Science, and Mechanics building. He is noted as committing the deadliest attack on a school in the U.S. history. Cho was previously diagnosed with severe anxiety disorder. Among the tapes he personally made to NBC News, Cho expressed his hatred for the wealthy, compared himself to Jesus Christ, and explained that he was forced to commit the mass shooting due to the voices in his head. Virginia Tech has held the #1 spot as deadliest school shooting for years. Holocaust survivor Levu Labrosse was a professor in the Engineering, Science, and Mechanics department at the school, who was famously remembered for using his body as a barricade against a door during the attack. He was killed during the attack, but managed to hold the door closed long enough for all of his students to escape. Cho ultimately committed suicide following the shooting. What a surprise. On to the next one. It was 2:30 when David Hogue heard the first shot. The 17-year-old was in environmental science class at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida. The teacher had passed out worksheets. When he heard the first bang, his classmates turned to each other. That sounded like a gun, they said. The teacher closed the door. Within seconds, the fire alarm went off. We instinctively walked outside, said David. We all thought it was a drill. As David's class walked towards the evacuation zone, they saw a tsunami of people running towards them. They turned and followed the crowd down the corridor. What they didn't realize was they were heading straight towards the shooter. A very heroic janitor stopped us, said David. He said, "Don't go that way. The shooter's over there." After they turned around, Ashley Kurth, the teacher in charge of the culinary program, known in school as Chef Kurth, funneled the crowd into her own classroom. Within 30 seconds, she easily had 30 or 40 people in there, says David. The lights were switched off. One girl had a panic attack and was given water, but Davis said most people were relatively calm. Then news of the shooting filtered through on their phones. David's younger sister is also a student at Stoneman Douglas. I knew he was alive, at least in the beginning, he says. I had a text from her and a call. She was frantic. I was petrified, but I knew she was on the other side of the school, far away from the shooter. David called his dad, a former FBI agent, who told him to stay calm. Other pupils called their parents, saying they loved them, but, says David, there wasn't much crying. There was a group energy that kept us strong. There was a melancholy calm. Davis is a student journalist, so started interviewing people, using his phone to record them. Figured if I died, at least this, the recording would be passed on to other people, so these voices would echo on. David tried to stay calm and help others. The classroom had 2 doors. If the shooter entered one, he thought they could escape through the other, but he knew that might not be good enough. I realized I may not survive, he says. It was going through everybody's mind at some point. We were all terrified. After around an hour, 5 members of a police SWAT team burst into the classroom. They told people to get down and put their hands up. At this time, they had eradicated the suspect, says David. We didn't know that, but they didn't have him. We were quite frankly running for our lives. When he reached safety, Davis said, shock, pure shell shock. He found his dad and his sister. One of her friends was killed. In the early hours of Thursday, David was still outside the school where 17 people had died hours earlier. I feel a mix of anger, sadness, but mostly passion, he says. I don't want this to ever happen to anyone else. The fact is there are 17 families that now have empty rooms. These are people's kids. They poured all the love, everything they could ever give into these kids, and it's all been taken by one piece of metal and bled out on the floor. It can be tough figuring out whether a student might be contemplating harm or if they're simply being irritable, angry, or withdrawn. The key is to look out for drastic changes in behavior, said school safety consultant Melissa Reeves, past president of the National Association of School Psychologists. Those drastic changes can show up in different ways. For some, it's increased outward behavior, so we'll see an escalation in grievances, an escalation potentially in anger. We'll see an escalation in difficulty managing their emotions as well. Others might do the opposite and become more isolated. We're still seeing significant changes, but that may now be starting to withdraw. They're no longer interacting with groups of friends. They're starting to spend more time on the internet. Broad statements of hostility, such as, I hate everybody, are another red flag, Reeves said. School shooters often link hints about their plans before they carry them out. I've seen it in nearly every case, and leakage is very specific because it is the school shooter talking about what they're going to do before they do it. I'm an 18-year-old male and I was home alone as a result of a family emergency. It was between 12 and 1 a.m. and I couldn't sleep because of a headache and a weird gut feeling which was probably caused by the emergency. I don't want to get too specific. I'm laying on my bedroom floor with my dog as for some reason it felt better for my lower back pain, which went away after 2 months of doing so. I'm laying in the dark as I suddenly hear the glass sliding door in the kitchen that leads to the backyard, which is surrounded by a 2.5-meter wooden fence with 2 gates which both have locks. The locks were off as I had previously wheeled the bins up the alleyway leading to the street, back to the sliding door which I forgot to lock. At first I thought it was the neighbors, but a few minutes later I heard the kitchen drawers slide open and closed. My husky lifted his head, ears up straight, listening. On one hand, I felt like going downstairs with my dog to investigate, but I've watched plenty of horror movies to know that what I'd be doing never ends well. On the other hand, I just turned 18, and I felt like I should man up now. It's my duty to protect the house while no one is home. I felt like a pussy. I decided to try and check the Alexa that's on the kitchen table. Accessing the camera, I saw nothing but pitch black darkness. I heard nothing. I'd also like to point out that on the kitchen wall, there are knives on display via a magnetic strip. I, on the other hand, had no weapon in my room. In fear of my dog potentially getting stabbed, I stayed in my room. If I opened the door, he would definitely run out. I made sure my door was locked and stayed quiet to listen. At this point, I'm texting a family member who drove over. As I heard the door unlock downstairs, I opened mine to meet them. Nothing was found. I felt like an absolute idiot. I know what I heard. Although no one believes me, I got told to lock the sliding glass door next time. That's it. Another family member looked through the Alexa, and as I heard a board creak, I immediately was asked if I was still in my room. When I asked if they had heard it too, I got a no. I wasn't sleepy or hallucinating, and I know what I heard. Did my family member hear that too and didn't want to freak me out? Was there no one there at all? Or was it a ghost? I'm not a firm believer in the paranormal, but I've had my share of unexplainable moments. I'm currently laying on my bedroom floor, writing this while home alone yet again, as my family members had to leave. I can't sleep. What am I experiencing? Am I going insane? There's something in my house, and my whole family knows that it's true. Let me explain. My room is next to the hallway, and there's a bathroom on the left side, and my parents' room to the front, and to the right is the hallway to give you a little context. When my parents turn their bathroom light on, the light goes under my door. After dinner, I told my family goodnight and that I was going to bed. I fell asleep and woke up to knocking at my window. This happened weeks on end, so I was calm. Yes, I know that it's freaky, but I've told myself that maybe it was the wind. But that night was different. It was harder and louder. It eventually stopped after 4 to 5 minutes. I eventually fell asleep for a few hours, and I awoke suddenly, and I thought I heard breathing in my closet, which was only a few minutes after I heard the knock outside. I'm shaking at this point when I stopped and froze for a few seconds, grabbing my phone as slow as possible and jumped up to see feet in my door. I jumped up running to the light, and it just like that disappeared. I ran to the closet and nothing. I got in my bed and fell asleep with the lights on. I woke up and nothing had happened. I was still afraid, so I invited my friend over. Fast forward to the night we were dancing and listening to music when the closet door slammed. I jumped back so far I hit my head. I just want to leave this house and start fresh. Ever since these things have happened, I'm afraid to sleep alone. And please comment if you know how to stop whatever is in this house. And I really don't care if you do believe me, but I know what I saw and what I heard. Over 10 years ago, me and my family lived in this small 2-story apartment building. Most of the unexplained occurrences in my life happened there. I tell my mom to this day that that place had to be haunted. The more I tried to logically make sense of some of these happenings, the less logical it all appeared. My younger sister and I, aged 15 and 13, shared a room and bunk beds. We had a ceiling fan and one of those large plastic floor fans that are usually gray in color, and you power it from a knob on the back side. Naturally, being the eldest, I slept on the top bunk. We had one window, but our apartment building was built extremely close to the building next to us, so there was no view of outside, and there was no natural light. The only view from our window was a brick wall of the adjacent building. One night, in the dead of night, suddenly there were loud noises coming from what sounded like the floor fan. It sounded as if a full-grown adult were either repeatedly slamming the fan on the floor or jumping on it like they were jumping on a trampoline. The noise shook me out of sleep and my voice died in my throat. When the noise died down, I tried to swear that I was still asleep and I was having a weird, reckless dream, till my sister said, "What was that?" The light could be turned on from the ceiling fan latch, so that's what I did, before cautiously peeking off the rail of the bed and down at the floor where the fan sat perfectly intact, with no power. From the sounds, I expected the fan to be in bits and pieces, or I assumed that it was powered on and something happened with the fan blades to make it unstable or something. Me and my sister stayed up for hours that night, not able to logically explain anything that happened, because she was the nearest. I asked if she saw anything. She said that she didn't, but she heard it. Our room was always pitch black at night if we kept the door closed. I asked questions about what she heard to confirm if it was the same sounds that I had heard, and she described the sound exactly as I had. She said it sounded as if the fans were being smashed onto the floor right in front of her, but she didn't see or feel anything. To this day, all I can say is, what the hell? Like really, what the fuck was that? I'm new to the group, so I wanted to share an experience I had back in the spring of 2018. I've had a few what could be considered paranormal experiences in my life, but this was the most recent and unnerving. I'm an avid outdoorsman and I love to hunt and camp around the Francis Marion and Sumter National Forests. Back in 2018, I took my young son and dog out to a remote area in the National Forest to test out a new camper shell on my recently purchased truck. We found a secluded area off of a dirt road, made dinner, and then packed it in for the night as soon as it got dark. At around 11 p.m. at night, I sat up and looked out the back of the truck due to the dog growling. In the distance, I saw what looked like hundreds of small white balls of light darting around, then hovering for a few seconds and slowly converging to our campsite. They looked just like the dust orbs you see on videos, but these were producing light in a completely dark forest. They soon surrounded my truck, seeming hundreds of them. They were soft white light, and they didn't blink. Lighting bugs were out early evening, but those were yellow and blinking. After 30 minutes of them floating around and concentrating around us, I finally worked up the nerve to open the truck and lit a lantern, and they promptly all scattered and disappeared. After turning off the lights and locking back up, they came back. My son was fast asleep, thank goodness. I watched him until I finally fell asleep around 1 a.m. The next morning when we tried to leave, the battery was dead on my brand new truck. There wasn't any lights in the back cab where we would have had power as well. A week later, I had to replace the electronic control module. Not sure if that is relevant info, but I thought I would add it. Has anyone ever had a similar experience? Just thinking about them makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck. This happened around 2017 in spring or fall. I was 19 at the time and I live in Germany. Me and my friends used to hang out at a friend's basement, smoke the good stuff and play video games, or watch movies until late at night. My best friend at the time lived just a couple houses down the street from where I lived, and usually it was the two of us riding our bikes back home. There was two routes we used to get home, one through the city, or the other significantly shorter one through a small forest about 1 kilometer in length, completely dark, but a proper forest road. The route made a 90-degree turn to cross some rails and a major unlit highway via bridge. We only took that route when we were equipped with lights in the group of at least 2 people, because there were a lot of boars, and you don't want to be on your own in case something happens. So one night we set out to ride home, both quite stoned and maybe a couple beers in, but not off the deep end. As we got closer to the 90-degree turn, where the road heads up the bridge, my friend who was riding in front suddenly brakes because there was a relatively large tree laying across the road. We both took our bikes and lifted them over the tree and continued. Maybe 10 to 20 meters later, we suddenly spot a fire on the side right at the junction where we had to make our turn, just the size of a small campfire. We both got a little slower as we saw the fire, and then when getting closer we spotted 6 to 7 people around the fire forming a semicircle as facing us. All of them were wearing long white dresses or gowns with masks, not Ku Klux like masks, but rather like a sailor's hat with veils. A couple of seconds went by. We were just staring at them, and I guess they were staring at us. Then one of them moved towards us. We started to sprint away towards a bridge on our bikes. We didn't stop until we were on a well-lit road again. That's been the craziest story among me or my friends ever since. But please, people, let's not meet again. So I was on my way home from Arby's with a mint chocolate shake, zoned out for a second and almost didn't notice his car. I tried just letting him through, but he insisted I go on ahead. I didn't think much of it and just continued on walking. He drove on ahead and parked his car near some apartments. He had on a black polo shirt, so I assumed he was just dropping something off for a job, As I kept walking, he approached me and offered me a $20 bill. This happened years ago when I was barely 14. My middle school and the middle school of my best friend at the time organized a trip abroad to Great Britain, London to be exact. It was supposed to be a few days looking at London attractions, museums, and shops. It was fun, till it wasn't. But the day before we were supposed to leave and go home, we were brought to the streets with some interesting shops. From there we could see Golden Freddy, and we received free time for shopping. Our teachers and guides had a brilliant idea. They told us after the time for shopping ends that we had to meet at a different street than this. In retrospect, it was like 100 meters away, but they still should do that. Most of us have never been in London. We're barely speaking English. We don't have a map of the city. Roaming services don't work correctly. 90% of the students got lost. I got lost with my best friend because we went in the complete opposite direction. We were both confused about the directions we were given. We were walking along pavement. My friend was running ahead or staying behind, nervously looking around. We didn't look like we were together because we were not interacting with each other. I guess that's why this happened. My friend ran ahead and stopped to look around when I saw a black car approach me and match my speed. I started to feel like this was a scene from a movie. It was broad daylight. There was a lot of people around and no one reacted. I was confused and didn't know what was happening. Then from the car stepped a man and said, "You are nice, come with me." And then he tried to grab me. The car was still running, so I suppose someone was still in it. I was stunned. I didn't believe it was real. At that moment, my friend ran up to me, grabbed me from behind, and dragged me away. We ran and tried to lose the tail, but the man and car followed us. After some time, we stopped, and my friend nervously cried, shaking me and screaming. Why didn't I move when the man tried to catch me? I explained my deer in the headlights moment. We cooled down and managed to ask someone for help, and we were found by our teachers. We didn't tell anyone what happened. We were sure no one would believe us. After that, when we got back, I told my parents and never went on an organized trip again. Almost a year ago, I was an opener at a resort, clocking in before 5 a.m. each day. The resort is located inside of an affluent neighborhood in a very wealthy town/suburb. Employees had to park in one of two parking lots at either ends of the property, and the lot I chose was adjacent to a long and windy road outside the resort, which led to the rest of the neighborhood. The road and resort were separated by a short range of brush and trees that no one ever walked through. I had arrived one morning per usual, put the car into park with my headlights still on. The lights in the lot weren't ever on in the morning, since no one else really showed up before 6 a.m. Save for security, I was the first employee to arrive on the property each morning, and was usually completely alone in this particular parking lot at this time. This morning didn't seem any different. I had my hand literally at my keys, my brain in the process to turn off my car, when I noticed a young girl, maybe 14 or 15 years old, come scampering. Her body language was the exact definition, run with quick, light steps, especially through fear or excitement. Through the span of trees that separates a resort from the outside road. She was directly in front of my car, and my headlights illuminated a clear view of her in the pitch black. She looked like she was in high school, had long blonde hair, and was wearing a jacket with pajamas, maybe, like she just walked out of a house. One thing about her that bothered me was that she wouldn't stop laughing and smiling. I couldn't hear her laughing from outside the car, but she was visually giggling at something I wasn't aware of or could see, and it was so unnatural. She occasionally glanced behind her as if someone else were there waiting away from the headlights. She then waved at me like it were a normal gesture at this time, and then immediately ran to the passenger side door. This all happened in a matter of seconds, and I wasn't really sure what was even happening, besides my anxiety levels spiking. I know I simultaneously yanked the aux from my phone to shut whatever song had been playing off while grabbing for the lock button. I remember feeling panicked for never remembering if it was up or down to lock when the girl began violently pulling and incessantly on my door handle on the passenger side. I realized because I didn't turn my car off, it had stayed locked. She began pounding on the window, and I was screaming at the top of my lungs for her to leave before pressing on my horn. I could see her laughing outside like this was some sort of game, as if I were a silly friend not letting her in as a joke. After a few seconds, she stopped the pounding, tried to open my car door again. Her face fell flat like I disappointed her. She started to walk away from the car back the way she came. She waved at me again before squeezing through the trees, out of the view of my headlights. This whole encounter confused me almost as much as it did scare me. Most people I told the story to just chalked it up to her being on drugs, but that narrative hasn't felt right to me despite her behavior. Maybe she was just being an extremely out-of-touch teenager whose parents need a firmer grip on her. My first thought was possibly human trafficking, but I'm not sure if that would fit this scenario, as I'm not the most well-versed on the subject. I told someone when I made it to LP, but they didn't seem to care much. I didn't call the police, and I do regret that. I'll never get out of my brain, though, how fucking off the feeling was. Watching a stranger, seemingly alone, pop out from the trees in the darkness, laughing, and then trying to violently enter your car in an empty parking lot. I do think the possibility of someone else being present the whole time is a lot more scary, and I wonder who else was there, and where exactly. This happened when I was a kid, and I double-checked the story with my family. So this was in the mid-1980s. I was about 7 at home with 2 of my older sisters, 8 and 11, and my 2 cousins aged 7 and 8, all 5 girls. My 11-year-old sister was in charge of babysitting us 4 younger girls. You have to picture what our house looked like to understand what happened. It was a 2-story box house with a flat roof and a small box front porch, also with a flat roof. I can't remember what we were doing, but we were all in the house. We kept hearing noises coming from the roof, like walking, and it sounded like rocks being dropped down the downspouts. You know, kids, we thought of a squirrel or something, but it kept happening. Then my older sister said something about how someone climbed the huge tree beside the house and may have gotten on the roof. We were all scared because we knew there was a roof access point in the bedroom that I shared with one of my sisters. What if he could get inside? My oldest sister told my other sister and one of our cousins to walk across the street to the corner store, cross an empty gravel parking lot, and on the way back look up and see if they could see someone on the roof. So the girls, both about 8 years old, walked halfway across the parking lot, and being curious kids turned around, looked up and saw a guy in one of those totally 80s guys crop top football jerseys. I think Johnny Depp in A Nightmare on Elm Street, to give you an example. The man was crouched down so low on the roof. The girls came running home freaking out, told my older sister about the man. My older sister freaked out. First she went to the neighbor's house to use their deck to see if she could see on our roof, but couldn't see anything. She came home and then called the police. It felt like it took them ages to show up. When they got there, I don't think they believed a word we said. They thought a whole bunch of little kids were making up this story for attention. One cop drove down the road, up a hill about a block away, to see if they could see anything, but the way the roof was, you couldn't see a person if they were laying. Then these cops tell us kids that we had to go upstairs and check everywhere to see if we found anyone. 5 little girls aged 7 to 11 sent upstairs, scared shitless, crying to look for this man, knowing about the roof access. We all cried, not wanting to go, but these cops told us we had to. To this day I remember how scared I was. I remember looking, but how well do little kids look, right? The cops didn't listen to us, didn't check out the house, inside or out. We were so scared to be left home with the guy out there, who knows where. We didn't know if he was just laying down on the roof or jumped down, or somehow got in and was now hiding. My mom finally got home a few hours later, and we told her what happened. My mom explained to us that there was a lock on the roof access, and no one could get in, but she checked anyways. Then went out to check out the outside. There were clear footprints in the dirt, dug in good from him jumping off the roof onto the porch and off into the flower bed. Oh, my mom was so steaming mad when she realized we told the truth and weren't believed by the police. We went to the police station the next day and were all separated and interviewed. We all told the same story. My mom went up one side of the cops and down the other. We never found out who the guy was or why he was there. Did he know it was a house with 5 little girls home alone? I answered the door for a guy who was dressed as a UPS driver, had the logo on his jacket and everything. I assumed my parents had ordered something that I signed up for, so I answered it. After opening the door and greeting him, I realized that not only did he not have anything for me, but there wasn't even a UPS truck in sight. He told me his name was Tony, and that he was selling lawn care services around the neighborhood. I started to figure that maybe he was just a UPS worker who forgot to change clothes before starting his second job as a landscaper or gardener. But then he started asking me weird questions like if we have any security cameras or large dogs in our house. We do have security cameras, but they're quite hidden, and I told him we did not. And even though our largest dog is a 1-year-old beagle, I told him that we have 2 pit bulls. The entire time he wasn't looking at me. He was almost looking around me, letting his eyes coast around the inside of my house, probably looking for visible sights of something valuable. He then asked me the weirdest question. He asked why I had a door cracked instead of opened all the way. I lied and said it was because I didn't want my pit bulls to see him, start going nuts. Truth is, I always do this when I answer the door for strangers, so I can close it as fast as possible should they try something. He then gave me a poorly made flyer from his supposed lawn care business and went off down the street to the next house. I shut my door and locked all of the locks on it. Tony, I hope I don't see you on the news anytime soon. Thank you guys for watching and listening to the very end. If you want your story featured on an upcoming video, email my email in the description box below. And until we meet again, stay safe, stay scared.